Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Back to School with Maz Jobrani. Today, we are going to learn a lot. It is a very enthralling conversation we have with one of the biggest brains I've ever met. We have Professor Ramesh Srinivasan on the show to talk to us about his new book. It's called Beyond the Valley. It's all about the internet. It's all about the digital world. He's going to tell us about why, number one, we need a digital Bill of Rights. Number two, why conspiracy theories are now becoming so normal. And number three, about how the internet is watching and recording everything you do. I know, it blows my mind. Watch your back, people. Watch your back. Let's go back to school with Maz Jobrani.
Maz Jobrani, hey, Jobrani Maz, oh, Maz Jobrani,
hey, Jobrani,
Mazzy, oh, Maz,
hey,
I got a podcast, oh,
back to school, yeah.
All right, guys, welcome back. I am so excited. Today's conversation, we are covering so much. It's the internet. You guys are listening to us right now using the technology that we will be talking about on this show. And it is really, really mind-blowing to learn so much about how the data that we are using, that the data that's being captured from us without even our own knowledge, we all know it's there. We all know they're getting data from us. But once you dive deep into something like this book, Beyond the Valley, you realize really how somewhat ominous it is. Caitlin, how are you?
Oh, I'm excited.
You're ready, right?
I love this topic.
Tehran, how are you?
I'm well. Here's the thing. You said that they are collecting this data. They're not. We're volunteering this data.
Yeah, we're giving
That's
it
what people forget.
away.
We're giving them. In a lot of cases, whenever we lose our rights, we're giving someone else that right to do so. And in this case, it's clear cut. We volunteer. We don't have to be on Facebook. We do not have to be on Gmail. We do not. The world functioned without these things. We're giving it to them.
As a fellow student on Back to School, I will say, Tehran, you just made a great point, and you are at the head of the class right now, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Because you are actually acknowledging this fact. We all are aware of that. We all are aware that we don't have to be on Facebook. We don't have to be on Instagram. We don't have to. But then we realize that when we are, there's this thing. We have a discussion a little bit because this book and this episode is going to go into discussing the psychological factors that are involved, but then also the human rights factors, the financial factors. There's a lot of other factors involved. So on a psychological level, I think as people are listening to this, some of them might be listening at home and they might be thinking, "Oh, wait, I want to check in and post that picture and let my friend know where I am or whatever." Knowing subconsciously that when you let your friend know where you are, you're also letting Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whoever else it is, the government know where you are. You're letting them know what you purchased. Because I know all the time, when I sit there and I buy something on Amazon, I know that I am giving data somewhere, and I know that I need that thing that I'm buying, but at the same time, there should be a way, and there isn't, I don't think, to opt out of all of that stuff. Is there a way when you buy? Are you guys aware of this? When you, for example, buy something on Amazon, can I say, "Hey, Amazon, I don't want you remembering this history"?
Yes, of course. What you have to do is you go on Amazon and then you go to the store and buy it. No,
Yeah,
that's how they
you don't
make
partake.
their money
Exactly.
is being made. Facebook doesn't sell most things. It doesn't sell it. Their money is information.
Yep.
Information is the most profitable commodity on the planet Earth.
People, we're doomed. We're doomed. We are. There's no way to escape it. You're being watched. You're being followed. All of the above. This doesn't mean I want you to crawl under your sheets and freak out and go, "Oh my God, the government's out to get me." They probably are out to get you. But once you give into that, the rest is great.
You can accept it and be fine.
You can say, but you know what I want you to do? I want you to go off the grid in a way, not off the grid, but get off your internet, get off all the Wi-Fi, social media stuff. Just listen to this episode, watch this episode, grab this book, spend a little time with the book. How about spending a little bit of time? Although when you buy the book, they'll know that you bought the book. But the point is, just read the book. Read a newspaper. If not this book, read a magazine. If not the magazine, talk to somebody. This seems to be an ongoing theme on Back to School with Maz Jobrani. Even though we want you to listen and share this with your friends, we also want you to spend time with your friends and look at them in the eyes and talk to them. So this episode is going to bring about a lot of ideas. It's going to bring about a lot of conversations. I want you to share this with your friends, have a discussion with your friends. Keep telling your friends about our show. We try to bring in really interesting guests. I will say this is one of the most interesting guests that I've ever had on our show. Not to take away from any of the other guests. They're all been great. All the conversations have been great. But this, Ramesh...
This is very relevant to our lives.
Very relevant.
On a daily basis.
Very relevant. So guys, let's get into this. I'm not going to talk anymore. I think it's time to do it. The book is called Beyond the Valley by Professor Ramesh Srinivasan. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to school with Maz Jobrani.
Back to school. Yeah.
All right, Ramesh Srinivasan. I love your name. Welcome, man.
You nailed it, Maz.
Thank you.
It's great. Yeah.
I'm so happy to have you here today. You know, you and I met doing TYT, the Young Turks, and we got to talking. I said, you got to come on the show, man.
Well, you were also so like funny and down to earth and cool to hang out with before, during, and after. So,
Bro, I like
chilling.
that. That's a plug for the Maz Jobrani train. Join the Maz Jobrani train. Let's just get right into this because there's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Technology, big in the world. You've written a book about technology, the equality factor, many other things. And we're going to start the episode, as we always do, with questions from now my kids. It was originally my kid, Dara, my son.
Yeah.
Now my daughter's in too. So this is going to be first is Dara, then it's Mila, and they have questions for you, Ramesh, and we're going to get going. Let me just make sure I get this up.
They always have the best questions.
They have the best question, but also speaking of technology, ever since the iPhone update, I want to talk to you about this. The latest update
upset about this for a
really
while.
has
Glad you're
really
here.
pissed me off because it's a lot harder to control.
And
my
it's your
videos.
fault, Ramesh.
All right,
It's
here we
your
go.
fault.
I mean,
You're
it's where-
technology
it's-
people.
It's where technology is
This
heading.
is how it
you
works.
know?
Black
go.
people get
Think
blamed
this.
for other black people.
All right, here we go. Dara's question first, then Mila. Okay. See, this is the stupid thing. Come on.
This is where
Are
it
you
starts.
kidding me? Are you? This is, Caitlin. I want you to keep this in there. iPhone. I hope you're listening to this. Your phones suck.
Unless you
iPhone, I hope
They
you're
are
listening.
listening to this.
They
They are listening to this. They
actually
finally
listening to
admitted
this.
it.
Yeah.
It took them 2 weeks ago.
Really?
They've been saying that they don't listen to like things on your phone, but then they admitted it a couple weeks ago.
Of course
Apple
they do.
did.
Dude, I had a thing.
Apple did.
No,
which
I had
they don't wanna
I had a
admit
thing
anymore.
on my.
Jeez.
It came up. It said, "Oh, if you want, you can, get Siri to do." I forget what it was. It was like maps or something. It goes, "Just speak into the phone, and Siri will blah blah." And I go, "You have all my information. Now you want my voice, son
Yeah.
of a bitch." All right, here
And
we
your
go.
face.
And my face. This is.
Yeah.
Retinal scans.
And by the way, the latest update is super annoying. Stop updating. I'm happy with what I have.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try and get this going. God, this is frustrating. Here we go.
Hi, Professor Ramesh. I have a question for you. Why is it so bad that only a few people run all the big internet companies? Hi, Professor Ramesh. I also have a question for you. Why is internet bad for your brain, and why does it damage your brain?
Who are
One
these
and
kids?
keep
Why are
it in
these
real.
genius kids?
They're
Oh my
very
God.
advanced.
Out the gate.
They got to be your kids,
Out
right?
the gate. Well, they're my wife's kids. I don't know who. I didn't teach them nothing. I always joke. I say because my wife's Indian, and I say that she taught them how to be smart and read, and I'm Persian, so I taught them how to negotiate. That's the joke. Is that I taught them not
No,
to pay
they're
full
like
price.
good brown kids. They're-
Yeah. So, which one do you want to start with? Why is the internet bad for your brain, or why is it bad that only a few people own?
I mean,
everything.
let's start with the bad for your brain, because this book Beyond the Valley is about the owning everything problem.
Yeah.
They're both huge problems. The internet doesn't have to be bad for our brains, but anytime we are overwhelmed with stimuli and overstimulated, it makes us unable to be mindful, to be focused, to be concentrated. It also stresses us out, right?
Like the people you see in the casinos, like when you see like the old,
bing, bing, bing,
the white hair, the old blue-haired lady just at the slot machine for hours, and I'm next to her, of course.
Yeah.
But it's like it numbs you, right?
And you know what's being released when you're doing that is dopamine, and dopamine is addictive, and we all love it. I feed off of it in various ways, but it also drains us out. It drains us out and makes us feel super strung out, very isolated, and it's correlated positively to depression. So this isn't like the internet doesn't inherently have to be this way, but the main problem, and I talk about this in Beyond the Valley, like is the technologies that have come to dominate the internet are designed to maintain our attention, which is actually it's almost like being addicted to something, which means you're disoriented. I mean, just on my way up here, just to like come and hang out with you guys, I received several text messages and emails, and I felt the need. I felt the compulsion.
Yes.
And so did the people who send me that you should respond immediately. And so I was like driving on the freeway using voice to text, which makes me look like a moron, and trying to respond to all these things. So they were like out of my way. So you constantly feel like you're that guy Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill, you know?
Dude, you are, first of all, why are you talking about syphilis? No, I'm kidding. Listen, our audience, I don't know if they know syphilis.
important.
Yeah, I don't know syphilis. I just know that I get the term.
you go.
But you are describing my life to the T. This morning I woke up early. I had my mind, I needed to sleep, but I couldn't sleep because my mind was saying you have to wake up, because I'd promised to film a few videos for a few friends who are doing events and someone's birthday and someone's this and that. And it really was stuff that could wait. And it wasn't something that was that had to be, that's urgent in my life. But because they asked me to do it, or because they send me the text, I feel like I got to do it. As a matter of fact, on the drive over here, I've been listening to Howard Stern, and I was enjoying listening to Howard Stern. I was getting into it, and there was a couple of red lights where I stopped, and I was like, oh, I haven't checked my phone in the past 3 minutes. Should I check? And I looked, and then there was a bunch of texts, and I get excited. But then I was like, don't answer right now.
It's the dopamine kick. Because what happens, it's two things again. It's like, one is just the rush of information, which means information is like following us everywhere because our phones follow us, and actually we're being tracked even when we don't have phones on us. That's a whole other thing. That's one problem. But then the other problem is the technologies themselves are designed to keep you, the word they use is engaged. It could be arousal.
It could be addicted.
Addiction.
Sucked in.
Crack.
Yeah.
In the streets, we keep, drug dealers keep people engaged.
Yeah.
Crack.
Right.
It's like crack.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It is like
you have
crack.
to clear your notifications. It's like a video game. All those apps, that's what they do.
Dude, it is. I mean, it is relentless. It used to be, because I used to do this joke about when it was back in the BlackBerry days.
I miss the BlackBerry.
Oh, I was gonna say you might be too young for that.
Nope,
You remember?
I had a BlackBerry. I
so
loved
back in
it.
the BlackBerry days, it had a little red light that would blink when you had a message. So I remember I'd get up sometimes to go to the bathroom middle of the night, and if that red light was blinking, I was like, "Ooh, what's going on?" And you check it, and it'd be like, you want penis enlargement? I was like, "No, I'm okay. I'm trying to sleep."
What were you searching that's what the
that
ad
was your targeted ad.
That's just a funny thing to say.
Sure,
I'm not
Maz, sure.
But the point is, now with the iPhone, even I flip it over when I go to sleep.
Me
but
too.
still, in the back of my mind, what you just said. Let me give you another great example. Just the other day, I sent out a tweet because Andrew Yang is running, right? And so I read an article about him, Washington Post. His family's immigrants. It made me think of my family a little bit. I have a friend of mine who's on the campaign with him, and he put out a tweet saying, help Andrew get to 1 million followers. So I was like, oh, why not? I'll do it. So I did a little tweet, tried to be funny in it. I go, support fellow immigrant Andrew Yang, blah, 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 blah. Well, people start hitting me up. He's not an immigrant. His parents are immigrants. There's an argument going on over my tweet that I was trying to be funny in. And it's really annoying because I'm like, and these, by the way, they're Andrew Yang supporters. So I'm like, wait a minute. Do you want me to help try and get him to 1 million or not?
Yeah.
And so really this is something that is not at all an essential part of my life at all. I'm not even saying that I'm like endorsing him or anything like that. I'm just saying, so
just to let you know, what you're saying is
Check
kind
this
of
guy
libelous, though, because you're calling him an immigrant as he's running for the president of the United States,
know.
which actually disqualifies him from running for the president of the United States.
exactly. Yeah.
If I was a true Andrew Yang supporter, I'd be like, whoa.
Whoa.
Well,
It's the Barack Obama effect.
to
But
your,
how many of those people are bots also?
well, I don't know what they're, but to your point, this has been like one of the most popular tweets I've had
Ever.
in years.
There you go.
As there's now thousands of people arguing, and even though I know that it's a frustrating, stupid argument that's being had without me involved, I just got it started. Every once in a while, and I'll be like, I want to see what's going on.
Check. And now you want to start
Yeah.
tweeting horrible things or wrong things so that people will engage
There you go. That's what I was
on
gonna get to.
that creates
Right.
the troll culture.
Yeah.
Because and this is a perfect example to for celebrities, I want to feel connected to my celebrity. If I say something good, they don't pay attention. But if I say something bad, if I boo Drake when he gets on stage, that's what gets the most attention. So it teaches me to boo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ramesh, let me ask you:
Right.
is there has there been a study done? Is there any way of figuring out the percentage of positive versus negative comments or energy or whatever it is on social media? Is there anything like
Yes,
that?
it's called YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, basically what's happening is these systems are like, so internet started like it was publicly funded. The web was a nonprofit initiative. That stuff's really important to know. 50 years old as of last week or 2 weeks ago. It became this place where it was super democratic. It felt like almost anarchic. Like we used to just send messages to one another. A lot of hippies used it, etc. Right? A lot of like community and even radical kinds of
ICQ.
active organizations.
The manifesto, the
Yeah.
Declaration of the Independence of the Internet manifesto.
Right,
Yeah.
John Perry Barlow, who
Yeah.
just died.
I don't know anything about this. What is this? What happened when it first started?
Yeah.
There was a community that did what?
So the internet, the first node of the internet, it was funded by U.S. taxpayers. The first node of the internet was at UCLA, and it connected to Stanford. And they were trying to send the word login. It just turned 50 years old, and only L and O went over there. So that's why, like Werner Herzog has this movie about the internet called Lo and Behold, The Reveries of the Connected World. So, all right. So basically,
See, we're learning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Back to School with Maz Jobrani. The first internet connection was UCLA.
That's right
to
here.
Stanford.
where I work at UCLA.
You were
Yeah,
you're a professor
yeah,
at UCLA,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
were trying to just send the word log in, and L and O got there.
That's
the
all
rest
it got
did not.
through. That's all it got through, and it was a military infrastructure. It was called the
course.
ARPANET,
Right.
but it was paid for by us, and it wouldn't have existed without U.S. taxpayer funding. I think that's important because all the dough that's coming out of the internet increasingly is completely being extracted by private corporations, right? So I think that's just welcome to America, right? In that way. But
It's
here-
like, I'm sorry, it's almost like we helped crowdfund this thing 50 years ago.
Exactly.
And then they made it and they forgot about us.
No, well, that's the way it went. So what happened though is on that's a hardware infrastructure. And then on top of it, things like the web and news groups and IRC and all that, it came up. And the early, like what they call the early adopters, just like the people who started like on there, were more like, I mean, a lot of it was like white acid heads, like kind of like Ken Kesey types and kind of psychedelic types and deadheads. I mean, John Perry Barlow, I think, was a songwriter. He was part of the Grateful Dead, the guy who wrote that manifesto.
Right. Well, wasn't it also like kind of like this libertarian community of like this
Always.
is a space free of government, like free of
Right.
hierarchies.
Right. And
I
it's-
need to be white, bro. Listen, when I grow up,
You come back.
I need to be back.
So wait a minute, this is almost like those people that get on those the what's it called, the walkie-talkie, the
Transistor
the
radio. or
transistor
whatever, yeah.
radio type, like it was a community of people that were like, we're gonna live outside.
Ham radio guys.
Yeah.
It was pretty like kind of this idea of an underground community, and all was like countercultural movements and hippie movements and even anarchistic movements have always blurred at times into libertarian ones. That's a very tricky line and a very
Right.
dangerous one for someone like me. But at the same time, that's kind of how it came to be. So these guys were the adopters, and they built news groups and stuff, and Usenet forums, and this is kind of what the web was. But the web itself was also created as a nonprofit like initiative in Switzerland by a British guy named Tim Berners-Lee. And so he's super pissed about what's also happened to the internet, because what happened is, and this is the key point that I'm writing about in this book and Beyond the Valley, as people like post stuff up, post, it became disorienting, right? Not only because of what your kids were saying, but also because we had to turn somewhere to make sense of it all. But the thing is, where we went, right? Google, Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, etc., they don't make decisions neutrally, right? They make decisions based on what supports their own benefits. And so it's as if like you and I are sending a message to one another, but there's a little gremlin in the middle that decides what we're going to see, when we're going to see it, and how that and is making behavioral analytic decisions on how that might impact us. Because again and again and again, what they built and optimized these algorithmic systems for, because now there's trillions and trillions of pieces of data on the internet. They built these systems again. They didn't build it saying, hey, we want people to be dysfunctional and disoriented and dopamine obsessed, but they did build it saying, computer, work with this, immense amount of data, and you figure out a technique to keep each of your users on there. So what you see, Maz, when you go on Twitter, when you go on Facebook, when you go on Google, what any of you guys see is going to be completely dependent on choices that are made for you. That's what's called personalization. That's another branding term, but actually for them.
Wow.
Can I
so,
ask?
So I'm sorry. One real analysis here. What you just said. The internet is one big casino, because the casino's job is to keep you on the floor and keep you putting your money in.
Not far off, man.
And that's what these companies are.
They even use the term persuasion architecture. It's kind of a weird term, right? Remember, like we all go to like supermarket, right? When we're up at the check counter, we get our
the flow.
People magazine, we can get our tabloid, pornish stuff, we get our junk food, blah blah blah. This is a physical architecture that's designed for obviously the supermarket's benefit.
The supermarket to make us want to buy things, and so it's a pathway to create more dependency.
Engagement.
There's a psychology. That's why they don't
Yes.
have like broccoli at the counter.
Psychological
Right.
and
It-
and it's
100%.
behavioral, and that's the thing that's really messing with people, because the behavioral modifications that are possible in choices that are made around what we see and when we see it and how we see it are choices obviously that suit not just the business purposes but can be messed with by third parties like Donald Trump's, team and Steve Bannon's team with Cambridge Analytica and so on, to manipulate much things at larger scale. So you have to always think about the internet and where we're at with it at scale, right? So there's the issues your kids are asking about, and we all face. We're like, what the hell's going on? We're disoriented, we're overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah. We're still stimulated at the same time, overstimulated. But at scale, imagine what happens when billions of people are using that, or an entire country is using that, or like those technologies are being used to build robotic and automated systems that are going to like displace working people.
Telnet.
Hold on a second.
We're
Before we
close to
hold on.
Telnet.
I want Caitlin's question, then I have a question, and then you got to talk about Telnet. Go ahead.
So, well, I was going to ask, at what point did this happen, kind of, for lack of a better term, like the colonization of the internet? Because there was the web 1.0 of like, welcome to my page, and just like everyone's kind of chilling on there. And then was it that they were starting to advertise, and then businesses were realizing like, hey, we could buy this, or...
Yeah, I mean, porn is a classical way of getting engagement,
right.
arousal, but it's also like, so we used to sing the praises of, do you remember this Web 2.0? Do you guys even remember this term?
Yeah.
So that was like a thing that was said, hey, it's democratic. There was even a video that went viral that I even used to show to my students called "The Web is Using Us," as if that's like a good thing, right? But what happened is all this sort of idea that we were socializing online, that we were sharing, how rad is it that I can like comment on what you post, or like what you put up, or whatever. That was all seen as a democratizing thing. But what ended up happening, this is about 15 to 20 years ago, all the stuff went up there, and we started to realize all of that was labor for these systems, right? Everything is labor and everything is content, right? These systems don't produce almost anything, right? Like, do you ever see, how many videos do you see on YouTube that YouTube created, right?
Right.
How much content do you see on Facebook that Facebook created?
I
But
say
on
this
top
all
of
the
it,
time.
it's all of our activity, even our non-active activity, just like when we're like looking at stuff. All of that is data that can be transacted into labor, that can then be computationally embedded in ways that can support their own interests. That's why they're worth so much. It's not this classic model of just making money and revenues and profits. Uber is not a cash revenue positive business. It's because it has an ability to control and dominate everything. It's the largest taxi company in the history of the world. But it calls itself, what does it call itself? It doesn't call itself a taxi company. It calls itself a technology company. That's all branding, right? Because technology is seen as efficient and neutral, but what they've done is socially engineer every aspect of our lives.
So wait a minute. So here's my question to you. So someone's listening to this right now, and they're going, "Holy moly! I'm this pod, this thing that I'm being taken advantage of. My information, all this other stuff. What advice? A lot of people have said just put your phone away just for peace of mind. But you're going even further. You're saying, hey, know that you're being controlled and that all this stuff is that you're being manipulated. what do we do? How do we deal with it? Because, I mean, I need to get on my phone to send a text. I need to get on my phone to post something, or do I not need to? Are you saying get off the grid?
I mean,
Whoa. That's illegal. Once again, we're crossing into that. Getting off grid is actually an illegal function in the United States.
All right. But what do you say? How do we deal with it?
well, Herzog even tells the story of these guys who, in like West Virginia who are trying their best to be like not tracked by any signal at all. He in that movie that I mentioned. Yeah, man. It's like there's not. On an individual level, all we can do, we are kind of lemmings in this current situation. All we can really do is try to develop good systems of balance and healthiness. I mean, there's not a lot we can do. Even if we move into encryption technologies, almost all of those technologies can be broken into as well, and have been in many cases. I mean, it's hilarious because like WhatsApp, for example, describes itself as encrypted, but WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, who we know is not interested in the business of user privacy on any level at all. So on the level of the individual, it's a bit of a tough slog, to put it mildly. We can try to choose what our relationship with technology can be, knowing fully well that even if we are not actively using technology, including our phones, we are still being captured and used by technology, right? So that's an issue. What I'm trying to push for are issues that are more at scale. They could be legislative. They could be about, bringing press and heat on these tech companies, because again, I do like to say this, like, I went to Stanford back in the day, and a lot of my friends are engineers, and people that I went to school with are not intentionally, like, I would say malevolent or sociopathic, but I think they're just, as engineers, I'm a trained engineer, as engineers, we were just trained to like engineer better, make it faster, make it more efficient. So like exposing these unanticipated side effects, and we aren't seeing a lot of evidence that that's having a great effect yet on Mark Zuckerberg, but exposing and bringing the heat on these issues could force a different system by which those tech companies interface with the world. So that's why I wrote this book. That's why I wrote Beyond the Valley. I've been pushing out like crazy op-eds. I've been going crazy in the LA Times on labor and the future of workers, on Wired piece that just came out a couple of days ago, other stuff like that, right? So I think it's about publicity, greater pressure, and I think there is some role for legislative action.
I was going to ask that. Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Though there's not a lot of understanding of what's going on by a lot of our politicians,
the laws are,
unfortunately.
they haven't caught up to the technology, and they don't understand it whatsoever.
It's always true with human beings.
Right.
Science and technology change much more quickly than society and culture, and also our society and culture are interwoven with these technologies. What is our society and culture outside of these technologies, right?
Well, that's the thing with
Get off the grid, right?
What
does that mean?
Yeah.
That's like with TV and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I guess now obviously there's regulations on television. You can only say certain things, or you have to have a disclaimer at the end. That's why the commercials are the way they are. But as you said, famously, Zuckerberg has said, "Oh, I'm going to keep whatever ad people put up, whether it's false or true or whatever. We're not even going to regulate it." So there's no regulation, right? So what do you say? You're saying we need more regulation. What about these people who go, no? I mean, I guess, is it right and left that are saying we don't want more regulation, or is it mostly right? Who's?
Well, here's the crazy thing, and I'm writing this piece hopefully for like the New York Times or the Guardian or some big venue called "Why We Need a Digital Bill of Rights," and in this I actually talk about all of these themes. I mean, basically, what we need is to restore some balance to the current situation, right? It's just a larger issue in American society itself. You can't have everything go to businesses who then end up dominating and destroying everybody else's lives. So like what we need to do with the tech side of things is try to push and force a level of balance. Like, hey, build your technologies, but come clean with what you're doing with our data. What do you know about us? Why do we see what we see? Here are ways you can be audited. Maybe even we can think about like systems like that involve persecuting. And I give examples of this in Beyond the Valley. Persecuting women, black and brown people, indigenous people. What if those people in those communities were part of the design process? Or maybe they even made a choice about whether those systems should ever exist. But to your point, Maz, we're at this really strange moment, and this is like good news, where both the Americans across the political spectrum don't want the current situation. Vox had a poll that came out a couple weeks ago showing 75% of people in this country, actually this country's way more progressive than you would imagine, right? And it's kind of crazy how the policies don't reflect that. But like 75% of people, for various reasons, are concerned about the issue. A lot of Republicans and are concerned about these issues because they think that social media is somehow just biased against conservatism. That's kind of a bit of a very small slice of the issue. There's not a lot of evidence around that, but it is true that folks at Google and stuff tend to skew Democrat, but all of it is very neoliberal and establishment based. I mean, Google's the biggest lobbyist, for example, in Washington D.C., and that exists whether it's Trump or Bush 1 or Obama.
And if you don't believe it, you can Google that. Here's my question. Here's my question too, because you're talking about some of the malicious ways these things get used. So Cambridge Analytica, what was it called? There was that movie on Netflix. It was called The Great Hack.
Yeah.
Great documentary. Check it out. I watched it. It was really interesting. And it talks about the way Cambridge Analytica worked into the elections. Yeah. And explain that a little bit about how they take this information about us. Because you were saying, listen, it's one thing to be like, oh, would you like these shoes? And you go, yeah, whatever, yes, no, move on. But it's a whole other thing to be like, look, Hillary Clinton was eating babies, don't vote for her. And you're like, I told you. I had actually very intelligent friends of mine who were open-minded who came up to me and said, did you hear about the sex ring that Hillary Clinton? Pizzagate. They go, did you hear about the sex ring that Hillary Clinton and John Podesta, they had a sex ring? I go, what? They go, yeah, it was in a pizza place. I go, wait. I go, why would you? I actually tried to do a joke about it. I was like, first of all, if you're gonna have a child sex ring, you wouldn't put it in a pizza place because then the kids would eat it and they'd all be fat and nobody would want the kids. But anyway, that didn't work. Listen, point is,
let's ruin our careers right here. Back to school with Maz Jobrani.
I'm trying to get more hits. Listen, the point is, some dude took his gun and drove to the pizza place and tried to free these kids that did not exist. So talk about how Cambridge Analytica took this information and fed it to the right people so that they would vote the way they would.
Yeah, I mean, totally. These problems have real world consequences, not just in our country, but all over the world. So even though I'm a professor at UCLA, I'm kind of really in the real world in a way. Like I had off the record contact with Cambridge Analytica for multiple years. Brittany Kaiser, who's like prominent in that movie, is someone that I had seen me speak in Mexico, kind of trashing Cambridge Analytica, and she was in the audience. So basically what is happening is we see examples of how self-serving, corporate, private-driven, engagement-obsessed technology can create disastrous effects for vulnerable people. Like it influenced Rodrigo Duterte's mass killings of people with what's his so-called WhatsApp warriors in the Philippines. It influenced a mass genocide. This I can go into all this if you're curious. In Myanmar, of the indigenous or of the Rohingya Muslim minority. It influenced terrorist activity against Muslim people because of misinformation in Sri Lanka. So basically what I'm getting at is this is the norm. And Jahan and Kareem, who made the film The Great Hack, I met them in Cairo years ago because I used to write for Al Jazeera and do my fieldwork looking at revolutionary movements.
How do they let you back in the United States when you leave?
Please don't say that.
Well, he's Indian, so he's not
the right kind of brown.
Yeah, the right kind of brown.
There are a lot of Indians who like Republicans and corporations.
Sure.
And Americans love
model
Indians.
minority.
Americans overall, Indians.
If you're going to choose a brown, it would be Indian.
It's the right kind of brown for them.
That's the better brown.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not a Muslim Indian.
And he's not a Muslim
like
either.
that.
Exactly. He's
They
not
like
walking
that
in
too.
going like, Allahu Akbar, I'm back.
Yeah.
True. Carry on.
Allahu Akbar.
Even though I was actually literally listening to a rap song called Allahu Akbar on my way over here by Brand Nubian. Anyway.
But you're already in the country.
I'm in the country.
You can't be going through TSA or whatever that is. You can't be going through passport control going like, Allahu Akbar, Yakalaka Akbar, whatever the song is. And you show it up.
That's a banger.
The guy would be like,
Surprisingly.
you, come over here for a second.
I mean, you remember that
Yeah.
scene in Harold and Kumar though, where he comes in with his like bong on their way to Amsterdam. Anyway,
that's one of the best. Anyway, both of them.
So all right, what did Cambridge Analytica do? So they are a symptom of a much larger problem.
Sure.
There's not actually evidence of how impactful they were on actual votes, just like there's no actual evidence. Like I agree with what the people at The Intercept say on this, and Cenk and I don't always agree on this, that the Russian government actually impacted the votes.
Right.
However, these are examples of what companies that are socially and politically completely irresponsible, like Facebook, make possible, right? So what did they do? They bought hundreds of millions, apparently, of Americans' credit card records. Did you know that I could buy all your credit card records?
What?
All of you. All of you.
It would be a really
From who?
sad picture that you would be seeing.
From what are called data brokers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So part of what I'm arguing in the Digital Bill of Rights is those guys should be cut
Shut
out.
down.
Right.
Down.
But
Wait.
but here's the problem. There's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So the concept is, if you regulate the internet business, it can also impact other businesses. And
That's right.
who doesn't want that? Walmart doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Dealerships don't want
Of
that
course.
because everyone mines data. If the information
That's right.
is power more than anything. Google
Yeah.
doesn't
Well, the
sell,
government
has
doesn't want
information.
that.
The government also wants our information,
Yeah.
and they are huge investors in all this technology. When it
point.
comes to
They're the
internet-
customers of these
exactly.
companies.
When we say the internet is owned by, let's say, a group of 5 people, 8 people, so is our media. All of our
Yeah.
media that we get,
Great point.
newspaper, television,
Of course.
radio, 8 people own
It's just,
all of
I
it.
guess,
Oligarchic.
I guess the difference
Yeah.
is the difference is back when I was in college and I would say, okay, I'm going to read this paper. I knew who owned it. This is their lien and whatever. That's whatever. I know what they're doing. I pay 50 cents or whatever it is. I get a piece of paper. I read it. I read all the pages. I throw it away. I'm done.
Yeah.
Now in the digital age, before I read that, I get this long disclaimer that goes, "Are you willing to?" And I go, "I'm not reading this." I go, "Yes, agree. I don't know what I'm agreeing to."
None of us do.
And then I buy it, and then the next thing I
Yeah.
know, exactly what we just said, a thing pops up that relates to that paper. I go, how did they know? How do they know? I've done
So
that.
let me explain what that is
Yeah.
relative to Cambridge Analytica,
Cookies.
just so I could really answer your question exactly.
Cookies?
And all this data can be purchased that we don't even know can be purchased. It's all open for sale. In the European Union, it's not. They banned it. That's one. Two is data can be retained. That's what you're talking about. So say if I had data about you, Maz, when you're like 18, and I had that available to me or any private company could purchase that 18-year-old data of you when you're like 45. Like they can access that data to make decisions about you and to foreclose opportunities for you. So that's the second thing. Third is what happens, and this is what Analytica did. If you aggregate the data, meaning like your credit card records are brought into some sort of psychometric profile, meaning the data are used to build and influence psychological models they have of your own identity. Profiles, and they're correlated. They're brought in conjunction with Facebook data, because a bunch of us played this stupid quiz called "This Is Your Life" or something like that, and all our data and all our friends' data was all made available to Cambridge Analytica. So it's imagine if data that you put out in different parts of your life are aggregated, right? So like it's one thing how I present myself on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. It's another thing what I end up buying, and it's another thing whatever. These are all called digital footprints. They're brought together. They're linked to psychometric models rather than demographic ones. So in Beyond the Valley, I actually interviewed David Axelrod. Again, very centrist for my taste, but good to talk to him. I was like, dude, what's the difference? I didn't call him dude, but I wanted to. It was a bit too formal for that. But I was like, what's the difference between what you guys were doing, mining data on people for in the Obama campaign versus what's going on now? And he said the major distinction is they were doing demographic micro-identification. In the Cambridge Analytica case, it wasn't just like you're a youngish black man, I'm a youngish brown man, or middle-aged brown man. It's the link to that to your psychometric identities, meaning the way you might interact with your significant other or your brother at this time of the day in relation to that topic might influence you to be conscientious or neurotic or blah, blah, blah. So it's actually every aspect of your behavioral identity, which is not static. It's actually very dynamic and relational is what they have access to. And then this is what they did. They fed people content designed to rile them up or influence their psychological identity to then influence their political behavior. That's what they did.
That's like saying yeah, we beat our wife, but they beat them more for worse reasons. We're
No.
still in the
No. What
realm.
it is I think what it is it's the next
You're doing
level of
something
it.
wrong.
So you're taking,
Sure.
so it's almost like, look,
It's the next level of it.
it's as things progress, it's going to go from, we used to just get this information that was roughly telling us who these people were. Now we know, not only do we know who they are, we know where they spend, we know where they did it. And I'm sure as we go on, whether you're from the right or the left, of course you want an advantage. And but in a way,
Steve Bannon was one of the heads of Cambridge
Right.
Analytica.
of course.
Yeah.
But in a
important to
way,
know.
what you're saying is interesting because it explains a lot. I have so many friends nowadays who go, I cannot talk to my old friend anymore because the thing they're posting on social media, it blows my mind. Actually, one of my close friends, who's still a close friend of mine, he'll send me these videos sometimes, which I'm sitting there, and he's a very smart guy. And the video's clearly been manipulated to, give across this very highly political point. And he's on the right, I'm on the left. But he'll send it to me, and I'm like, even if somebody sends me from the left something that feels this manipulated, I question it. Yeah. So then when he sends me one from the right, I go, "You're a smart guy. Why aren't you questioning it?" It feels like what Cambridge Analytica did and these other companies are doing. They're creating zombies. Like they are basically, we are basically exacerbating. Like there's probably more. I bet you if a study were done, there's probably more conspiracy theorists now, percentage wise, than ever before.
And let me explain why the conspiracy theory thing has become the new normal. It's for the same reason that we were talked about earlier. It's because anything that gets your attention, that grabs your attention, like a car crash or like the stuff that President Trump likes to tweet about, by the way, it's all an intentional media PR strategy. And his insanity works perfectly well for the way in which the architectures of social media function. Every like election or politician that happens to actually take power and be successful is partly a story about what the internet looks like at that time. You know what I mean? You can really kind of see it that way. And so what has occurred basically is groups like Cambridge Analytica are the new normal, actually. Any PR firm will be wanting to think about things in similar ways. And Cambridge Analytica was up to all sorts of fishy activity in dozens of countries, over 12 countries. I talk about it in this book, all over the world. So the impacts of these of private, corporate, American-centric, and we didn't even talk about the Chinese stuff, which is also I talk about in this book, on the larger world and on working people and middle-class people is profoundly, see the word is disruptive, which is another term that they use in their branding, right? So it's you use public language, you use language of innovation, and that's your pivot, that's your bait and switch to convince people that it's okay, plus that they don't understand and they're overwhelmed by technology. Human beings tend to treat technology as neutral, just like science. And then as what's actually occurring is you're socially and politically engineering the 99%.
So what are some examples of the internet being used in a more democratic way? You talk about that a little bit in the book. So give us a couple of good examples of that.
Yeah, totally. So like back in the day, right, when I was in these are old school stories, but like back in the day when I was when I was meeting the filmmakers who made it's called The Great Hack, right? Yeah. So when I was in Egypt, and there was this bullshit narrative again produced by the West that because of our technology, these people overthrew the government. That's ridiculous. And obviously I wanted to debunk that narrative, doing what I do, which is like be on the ground, hanging out with people, talking to as wide range of people as possible, looking at all the scholarship I could. And it was a bullshit narrative. However, that didn't mean that certain people who were a very small demographic, like you were young, progressive, but upper middle class and educated, weren't using social media in very tactical ways. That's the key. So activists on the ground can make massive change occur when they understand how these technologies function, not on a deep level, but they understand, hey, I can get people's attention using this stuff, right? So that's what we saw occurring there. They were able to re-engineer the satellite television media coverage of the revolution, which beamed back in the country, by posting and shaping content on Twitter and other platforms to influence journalists. Not because any other Egyptians were looking at Twitter, because no one had access to it at that time. No one wanted it. Why would they want it, So this is an example of what we see occurring. There's other examples like this. We see it with Black Lives Matter, for example. Patrice is on the cover of this book, one of the three founders of Black Lives Matter. And, and she and others in that movement have talked to me about how they use this to videotape stuff, document stuff,
Right.
post stuff, make it go viral, try to influence journalists. So there's bottom up activity, but it's all about being tactical. Like, you got to understand what you are or are not up against. And in many ways, we have to just kind of be okay with being monitored and surveilled all the time.
I mean, we
Right.
already are. Regardless, we have 17 clandestine organizations in the United States. Everyone knows CIA, maybe NSA, but there are at least 15 other organizations with, by the way, with a black budget, so we don't know how much they get. All they want is information on us all the time. That's why it's illegal to live off the
There's
grid.
like COINTELPRO. There's stuff like Peter
Yes.
Thiel's group, Palantir.
100%.
Yeah.
Mr. Peter Thiel, I invest in all the information technologies and have made billions of dollars off it.
Holy moly, I'm going to go all cash and only
Cash under your
letters.
mattress.
By the way, your cash is
Write letters.
also they follow your cash. If you put a bundle of cash together, you will feel the metal strip that exerts itself, and they can tell how much money you have every time you travel.
Okay. I'm just
Even
gonna,
though you're supposed to legally be able to travel in the United States, but and if you have an exact a lot of money, they will take it in civil forfeiture.
I'm here. This is a learning moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to start bartering in goats.
Surprisingly,
Surprisingly, your
Well, that's why
goats.
people are like going towards the cryptocurrency thing, but I feel like that's probably just going to
That's
bring
another-
us right
that's
back to where we
another.
started.
That's another one. Those
Yeah.
You know what I-
twins
I'll talk
got
about
us.
that.
You know what I think
Yeah.
the key is? I think the key is to be Keith Richards. And I'll tell you my theory on this. Keith
Little Voss
Richards
twins.
Oh, I have a theory.
has
about this.
said he is like, I mean, he's somebody who's been through so much and done so much where he's like, follow me. I don't care. Like, I don't care what you're, it's just, if you're at a point, like you just said, once you give in, you go, they're going to be following us anyway.
Yeah.
So I may as well try and flip that to take advantage. Like you said, it's about how do I use this weapon against you, right? Which is what the people did in the revolution. Which is, look, as comedians, a lot of time we're sitting and going like, how can I get this clip to go viral? How can I use this to my advantage so that then I can get more followers and then therefore, yes, get more money, but at the same time get my message out to the world. So
How can I take more of the red pill? Yeah, Maz, great advice. Great
Well,
advice.
there's even evidence that when our phones are on airplane mode, they're recording us. I mean, it's kind of like the challenge. The issue with that, Maz, is like, I mean, I remember I was talking to Emory Douglas, who's like the Minister of Culture for the Black Panthers, an amazing man. He was the artist who did all the Black Panther like murals and stuff.
Wow.
And he was like, you know what? If they want to follow me, and he's like been used to that since the 60s, right?
Yeah.
And he lives in the Bay Area, and he's a super cool guy. And he was like, if they want to follow and monitor me, that's fine. I can teach them something. The problem is we know systematically throughout the history of this country and really of the world that it's always vulnerable people, people who are trying to rattle the chains on behalf of vulnerable people who end up getting in big trouble. So the thing is, what you can do with these so-called digital footprints is you can stitch together an identity of someone to turn them into a criminalized subject. That's another issue, right? So like, there's enough stuff out about me. I mean, I ain't no criminal, but like if you just stitch together what I might have done at this time with this time with this time and said this word and blah,
create
blah,
conspiracy.
you can composite what they call
anyone.
profiles, profiles
100%.
that then criminalize these subjects.
Well, that's what these videos are. I mean, I get these videos sent to me sometimes. Again, that same friend of mine, he sent me when the whole thing came out about Barack not being American and being not having the birth certificate. There was this video that went around. I think it was Dinesh Sosa, one of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody put
Oh,
a video together, and it was all about. Well, then he was seen with this guy, and then he walked the streets with that guy, and then he bought a.
And he took a picture with this guy.
Took a picture
People-
with it, and then people are like, what?
They
And
call
so
triangulating the data
yeah,
sources,
it's
right?
cra-
Yeah, do you know how many terrorists
People are
you've
doing
taken a
that.
picture with, Maz? You don't
I'm
know. People
sure.
after the show.
Right.
Bro.
Maz, I love you, Maz. You're my favorite. You don't know who these people are.
The truth is, in a society, listen, in America, I still hope that I still have some rights and innocent until proven guilty.
you would hate to be black,
but,
Maz.
but let me tell you, because the truth is, I know for a fact, one of the things I say about, like, people will hit me up now on Instagram, go, why don't you come do shows in Iran? And I go, look, I haven't been to Iran in over 20 years. I left 40 years ago, but I do know for a fact that when there have been, people that have been in prison and there's been a movement or something and they asked me to do a hashtag post, I've done that. I've tweeted directly to the president. I've tweeted directly to the supreme leader saying like, this is ridiculous, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I also know there's a picture, Facebook sent me this picture, when the Green movement happened in around 2009. People were protesting, and there was almost another revolution to get rid of the current government. And there was a rally at UCLA, and they asked me, "Would you come host this rally?" And it was all about, it was protesting the results of the elections, which seemed to have been manipulated, and Ahmadinejad won again. So I am there. There's a picture of me standing there with a microphone, and I think it said like "Free Iran" or "Free Neda" or whatever, the girl who'd been killed.
Neda Agan Sultan.
Yeah. So whatever it was, I have one of these shirts, and so I remember being there, and I go, God, if I were to go to Iran, I just feel like there's going to be a person somewhere will come up and go, hey, what's this picture about?
It's all it takes, because what states have done, especially smart ones, Egypt wasn't smart at that time, but they've gotten smarter since, is they've invested in
Muslim
this kind of
Brotherhood.
technology, and they've invested in these partnerships with corporate surveillance kind of agents, right?
Yeah.
And Iran was actually ahead of the curve back in 2009, which is part of the reason they were able to just basically overturn all of this. I mean, not only did they just in multiple ways. They shot down Neda and other people, but they also had alternative. They had like what do you call that? Like double agents online to manipulate and disrupt and tear apart what people were talking about online. But they also were spying online. It's a model. So state persecution and authoritarianism can work very well with the way these digital technologies are designed. So it's like the most paradoxical moment ever, right? We see this kind of power to the people history, at least kind of like hippie one. We've seen examples of movements that have managed to take their causes and popularize them and globalize them. The Zapatistas were an example of that back in the day. They were able to take their stuff that were local and globalize this. We still see examples of this stuff today, but then we see these sort of hidden, Casper, the unfriendly ghost in the middle of these networks, manipulating and grabbing, capturing, and constructing subjects and targets of consumer exploitation, worker exploitation, and democratic exploitation.
So how does an individual listen to this right now? So there's a few things. First of all, I think every guest we've had on here has said, put your phone away for a little bit, be involved face to face, just be present a little bit more.
It's changed my mood today. I mean, I was on my phone and my computer nonstop since 5:30 in the morning since I got here, and I'm just like in a way better mood than I was before I walked in.
Because you've gotten off, right?
Yeah,
we've
just
been
because
talking.
we're hanging out. Yeah.
So to answer Mila's question, my daughter, you're saying the internet is bad for you when you are in there. It can be addictive. So let's get off of it a little bit.
And what was your other child's name?
Dara.
Yeah,
Dara's
Dara.
question was, why is it bad that only a few people own
Can I
it?
just answer that?
Yeah.
The concentration of power and hidden power, where we don't even know what these people know and what they're building and for what purposes. And because a lot of these companies are not actually about making money now, they're about their valuation. Everything about capitalism is about speculated valuation and concepts like credit and debt and so on. That's a whole other thing. But that concentration of hidden power, which means usually a few white dudes and maybe like some white and Asian males, end up controlling almost everything on a global level involving billions of people, is going to always create these gaps. Even if they were the most humanitarian people, they would build technologies based on who they are. Say they just were all nonprofits or like community organizations, but they just built it in Silicon Valley for people in Burma, in Myanmar. There would still be problems, right? Because of the distance, the gaps between those worlds and these worlds. But if their goal is to just hijack everyone's attention and keep them online for their own purposes, you can imagine how disastrous that is. So not only is it oligarchic in a traditional media way, like we were talking about earlier, it's also about the concentration of power over behavioral, experiential, social, and political and economic life, right? Because every single aspect of our lives moving forward, and kind of we're almost at that point today, is expressed digitally somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if you get insurance, it's some algorithmic system that determines what your risk assessment is. If you want to apply for a human resources job moving forward, or you want to apply for a job, a human resources algorithm will be the one increasingly that will mine your CV and make decisions about whether you are or are not considered worthy of the job, which we found out is discriminating against women for science and engineering jobs. If you are an immigrant and ICE comes to try to round you up using Amazon sold technology, don't ignore the spat between Bezos and Trump. understand that Amazon and the Trump administration are very good friends. You have to because it's all about business, right? And ICE bought Amazon facial recognition software. They go up, they round up people right here in East LA, and a lot of those people who might not be in an undocumented database are identified as being in an undocumented database because the undocumented databases are all black and brown people, especially Latinx people, right?
Yeah.
So there's misidentifications that are occurring. Or why Serena Williams, Michelle Obama, and Oprah are all identified by every major facial recognition system as men. So these problems
Really?
Yes.
Yes, and these problems have everything
Because
to do.
the white men who designed it aren't able to tell the difference between.
I'll tell you why. Because they haven't built the sophistication of that sort of diversity into the coding sets, and they haven't fed those systems with the data sets because they're learning. They're AI machine learning technologies, and they haven't asked these people to be part of the design process or the part of the auditing process. It's because they're anti-diversity in their business model.
100%. They actually misidentify black and brown people all the time. Technology that's amazing, right? And it actually affects us. It affects us when it comes to these criminal profiles, once again, or rounding up brown people, or letting black people back in the country based on if you go into the passport, what happens? They have those machines that scan your face and let you in. Well, guess who gets red flagged more?
Yeah.
Because they were misidentified.
AI is
Holy-
Well, let me give you
Holy
three
moly.
really quick
it's
examples.
the builders.
Yeah.
The builders are simply
Right.
basing it.
They're out of touch. They're disconnected,
Right.
yet they claim the language of connectivity and they monetize connectivity. Three really quick examples. One, when you used to search on Google image search for gorillas, you get images of black people. How did Google deal with that problem? They removed gorilla from their image search. That's how they dealt with it. They didn't deal with the underlying issue.
God.
That's one. Two is we've built predictive policing systems that LAPD was using it. Luckily, we got them to stop it, like my friends and stuff. And they were selling predictive policing technology that would apply itself to analyze different cases and different reports and make decisions on which neighborhoods were considered gang-based.
Yeah.
And they were again and again and again disproportionately choosing neighborhoods, even if they didn't have a lot of prior criminal activity, which we already know is racist and biased. They were choosing these neighborhoods as criminalized. Third example, we've built predictive. I give all these examples in Beyond the Valley. We built systems that are algorithmic systems that are going to make decisions about people's court cases on the likelihood that they'll commit a future crime, specifically a future violent crime. This is like Minority Report, right? And what they found again and again and again, that black folk who have no prior criminal history are judged as being more at risk for violent future crimes than white folk with felony convictions. See, even if you control for who has a felony conviction, it's the black folk that are targeted. So we're embedding these systems it's not just about surveillance. It's not just about Facebook. It's more about power over technologization of our lives. That's why I wrote this. That's why I wrote this book. I wrote it so anyone can read it.
Why aren't you running for president?
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to, assist and support Bernie's campaign in whatever way I can.
Okay.
I mean, I interviewed a few, I interviewed Elizabeth Warren also, and I mean, and I do respect some small aspects, I would say, of what Andrew Yang is supporting, but to me, it's a very small slice into a much larger issue. I mean, I should get involved in stuff. I mean, I just want to build with you guys. That's why I wrote all this stuff.
I feel like you should be a recurring professor on this because I'm learning so much.
We could do this
Keep me on.
forever.
Yeah.
Well, you say
There's
that,
so much in this book that's also positive. I write about all these DIY experiments with technology in the east of Africa, all these resistance movements and alternate, like people and indigenous people in Latin America building their own cell phone networks. There's crazy, I don't know if I could swear. There's crazy stuff going on all over the world. And that is alternative and bottom up. It's not to the scale of these companies, but remember, technology can be taken in other directions.
he's going to be
I have a
exiled
question.
You had a
to
question.
Russia soon.
So
with Snowden. Just wait. There's one more page.
in the spirit of hope or things we can do or whatever is I don't know if you've seen the Adam Curtis film Hypernormalization.
I
but
love that film.
It's not my favorite Adam Curtis film, but he makes a incredibly crazy point that's so depressing about
Power of Nightmares is my favorite one.
Yeah. And then he makes a point about how the internet or technology has become a shock absorption system for So like, I like how you said hidden power. There's hidden power under here, but what the user interface is a shock absorption system, or like an echo chamber where even like resistance is absorbed.
Yeah.
So I guess like
That's beautifully put. It's a great point.
yeah. And so he, I guess the digital Bill of Rights applies more to our data and being profiled or whatever. But what are some things that we could do or that anyone could do to stop the cycle of just like the echo chamber or seeing what you want, or your activism being absorbed by the kind of machine of the internet?
So, I mean, I use the term Bill of Rights in this piece, which is hopefully going to come out pretty soon. I'm working on it pretty hard right now. I'm using that because it's American language and it's kind of like fits with American discourse, right? It's not actually about a Bill of Rights. It's about it is partly about that, but it's actually about what happens at scale and systemic interventions into all these issues. And among that, it would be disclosure, transparency, and active regulation of all of these issues at scale. So you're right, on the level of the experiential of a black box technology, we have these sort of mollifying, almost like, euphoric sorts of experiences, the like dopamine hitting our heads. So that is part of what needs to be shifted up by, instead of it just being this kind of pleasure principle kind of experience, instead what we need, what I'm asking for, these are very basic things I'm asking for. One is to say, give us opportunities to understand what about us that is influencing what we see. That's a very conservative proposal, which hasn't happened. But I'm going to try to make it happen.
And it will never happen.
And then a second issue I'm talking about is, give us opportunities to look at this information landscape in other ways. There's a lot of stuff we can do to kind of expose at scale what's happening. And if you can expose it at scale and people realize it's disastrous for our economies and our democracy, what's left of it, then you might be able to get some pressure on them. But it's not an easy job,
On the day-to-day, like for example, you were saying using the system to kind of for your benefit, which way they did obviously some revolutions, some protests. On the day-to-day, like there's a guy like David Simon on Twitter who was the creator of The Wire. Yeah. He is fantastic because he just cusses people out, and it's just crazy cussing, and it makes me feel good because I don't go that route, but it feels like he's someone who's been like, you know what? I'm just gonna take all this crap that's coming at me. Maybe they're bots, maybe they're this, maybe it's crazy. I'm just gonna rant and then move. It feels like almost there's a cathartic thing to it. So a regular person who's sitting there going like, okay, I'm getting caught up in this argument, I'm getting caught up in this debate. What's your advice? Is it just let go? Is it just cuss the person and leave? What is your advice to that
Maz
person?
is trying to get help for himself. He writes a lot of political posts. And
what's the advice?
Well, do your clicks also feed that? Like, I remember that from the election. It's like your clicks actually help them. I don't know.
Help elevate more hits.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's kind of like this is one of the main things we got control over, which is like, what do we want as much as possible? This is like not a technological question. It's a human and personal question. Is like, what do we want our experiences with technology to look like? Every single person who like hears this or watches this podcast should ask themselves that question. Take that out. Check out Beyond the Valley, the book, because I try to give tons of examples. And so here's the thing, right? It's like, how much of myself do I want to give to an ecosystem that I know is built upon dopamine obsessive experiences, right? Can I have that discipline to not respond to someone who's trolling me? Which I think most of you all who are well-known and celebrities have a good way of dealing with that, because we know that once we do that, it creates a vicious cycle, right? So all we really have some control over is our own, as much personal sovereignty and autonomy as we can. How often do I want to be using my phone? Can I set boundaries that are healthy for me? People are always like, hey, what about my kids, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it's not really about your kids per se, but think about what you would want for your kids if you're a good parent and then apply the same logic to what you might want to do for yourself.
That's a good learning moment. Think about what you would want for your kids if you're a good parent, and then apply that same boundaries
To your own health, man.
to your own health.
Yeah.
Do what you would do for your kids. Do it for you. That is deep. Listen, man, I'm going to start trying to work on wrapping this up because we can keep going for hours and hours. First of all, how do people find you on social media? Speaking of getting
thanks.
off.
Yeah, I mean, and I actually try to engage with everybody who interacts with me on Twitter. I've just started getting active on it. It's Ramesh Media, RAMESHMEDIA. So that's my Twitter handle. That's the main way I engage with people. I'm sure you can imagine, Maz, it's like the same thing that's happened to you. Like as I've become more and more public with calling this stuff out, including like I'm on the Young Turks almost as often as you. I think it's like the trolling that comes my way is pretty intense, especially being a brown guy doing it.
Oh, absolutely. And then you look at the person's page that's trying to troll you, and they got like 2 followers. You go, this is a bot or this is some crazy
They're
person.
always private.
There's some
Yeah.
estimates that Trump's 67% approximately of his followers are bots, by the way.
I believe it.
That's on Twitter. I mean.
So Beyond the Valley is the book. You guys pick it up. This is a great read. You're going to feel smarter. You're going to be off your phone for a while you read it, and you can order it on Amazon. Use your phone to order it, but then stay off your phone. One thing you said earlier about Trump being almost like the perfect president of the time. He's almost like the LeBron James of this social media, right? He's a natural for this stuff.
Of internet trolling.
He knows how to do it. He's constantly doing it. He's on there. He's really good at it.
He's like LeBron KFC, like the mix of the two.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
I agree.
No, but he's
like-
he's good at one thing, and that's what it is.
Yeah,
He's
he's a great content provider for the way that media of all forms function, right? I mean, we know how he's the ultimate cash cow. Les Moonves said it from CBS. He like came out and said it. I think he's been Me Too'd now, but anyway, but I remember when he came out and said it, he was like, we may not like what he says, but this is the best thing ever for our business model. So apply that same logic, right? Of how CNN, MSNBC, etc. love to cover Trump's sort of crazy rants, right?
Yeah.
And then you think about these algorithmic computational systems that are trying to do the same thing. They're in hidden and much more immersive ways trying to keep you engaged, keep your attention. That's what's at stake. So, it's again like Trump sort of sees social media as a way to bypass media that he thinks hates him, but actually, even though that media might find him to be too much, they love covering him, right?
Absolutely.
So he sees it as a way to engineer and hijack people's attention as well, and he's been excellent at doing that. It's kind of the thing he's really good at. He's good at saying things in super raw, nasty, captivating ways, in a bad way. And he's good at saying stuff that maybe we all think in our worst moments, or some of us think in our worst moments, and putting it out loud. And people love that. People love that. And then he also analyzed a systemic problem in our country, even though his solutions were to make everything much worse. But Bernie sees that same problem,
Well, Trump is kind of like the racist uncle. So the internet is good for your racist uncle, or your racist uncle is good with the internet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
I've learned that I'm screwed. I've learned that resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. We will all be part of the Borg.
All right, we're heading down the.
Well, let me just add one thing to that. There's even some insanity coming out of Silicon Valley, including investments that Google's made, that all this data is going to be used to incubate robotic systems or versions of ourselves, like cyborg systems, and new sort of robots that will replace and allow us to live forever.
The Borg.
Absolutely.
The Borg.
But it's only rich
it won't
people.
allow
And
us to
No, not
exactly
you and
the
I,
rich.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
I see.
rich
Because the
people.
last thing the world needs is a second one.
This is
Back when I was a kid, the
That's
only
not-
Borg was Bjorn Borg, the tennis player.
There you go.
All right, what have you learned?
So much. I think, to focus on a positive, and we
Yes.
didn't go into this that much, but you also talked about it, I think, in your TED Talk, we touched on it, kind of the hopefulness of like what technology does give people. It's like the Witness program, or like Bellingcat, Elliot Higgins doing like the citizens journalism, like kind of using the platform, learning how to use the platform in a good way. Like you can have body cams to record injustice happening, and like you can use it for positive things even though it's overwhelmingly negative.
So Professor Ramesh here has helped. So we've got one person who sees the future is dark, one person who sees the future has, as I choke, the one person who says the future has hope, and I will say, what I've learned is you have a lot of information in your brain, and I loved all this stuff, and I feel
I get like hyper and excited.
No, I love it. I mean, so you got your PhD from?
No,
where'd you go?
Where'd you go? What
Likes
to do.
Was it? There's a Stanford. There's I think an MIT, and there's what's the other one?
The MIT Media Lab.
Yeah, I did my master's there, which has now been Jeffrey Epstein connected.
Wait, give us the undergrad, grad. Where'd you go?
Which one?
Where'd you start? Undergrad was Stanford. Then you got master's from
MIT,
and your PhD from
Harvard.
So this guy is the trifecta of immigrant parents. I am proud of you. I'm not even
it's
Indian.
An immigrant parent's dream.
This is an immigrant parent dream we had on today. So if nothing else, let your immigrant parents know they should listen to this whole episode because we have got the king of immigrant parents' dreams right here.
By the way,
Holy
Facebook knew
Trinity.
you were going to choke right then, by the way. Just
I know,
to let you know.
they did.
Facebook knew before you choked that you were
I literally choked.
Yes,
you
they
choked.
did.
You came to the... No, but listen, Ramesh, I am so happy we had you on, and I would love it.
You all are awesome.
I would love
Can
it
I come back and hang out with you?
Dude, I want to keep doing this. This is amazing. I'm serious.
There's a lot of the book is about how do we restore humanity to technology. And humanity doesn't just mean universality. It means our diversity, our difference, a consciousness and love and compassion for working people, for indigenous people, people of color. There's a Cornell West sort of vibe and energy that is why you might get sense that I'm generally kind of quite positive, actually.
Do you know who Cornell West is, Kayla?
Yes.
Okay.
This is your one joke. And you
Guys, Beyond the Valley.
I'm white.
Listen to this episode. Pick up Beyond the Valley. If you loved, which I think there's no other thing you can say, if you loved listening to Ramesh educate us today, I thought this was a great episode. Thank you for being part of it. Pick up Beyond the Valley. Ramesh, thank you for being on Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Man. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me.
Back to school. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Back to School with Maz Jobrani. We hope you're enjoying it. We hope you're having fun. And we hope you're learning something. So make sure to let your friends know. Share it on iTunes. Share the clips from YouTube. Just get it out there. However you're listening, let your friends know to tune in to Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Back to school. Yeah.